Hello, welcome to Therapist Take. We are going to talk about the power of the spoken word, so don't go anywhere. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Take. We are doing another live broadcast. Well, it's supposed to be live, but we've been having some internet trouble. And we're going to talk about the power of the spoken word. I have a special guest here that I'll introduce here in just a minute. But just to kind of remind everybody to make sure you head on over to our different social media platforms, which I'll make sure to link in the description. Or if you're listening to this on podcast, it'll be in the show notes, and we'll try to put all the resources and everything that that's mentioned in this podcast that we can provide a link to. We'll try to do that. And so check that out. And then, like I said, we've had some technical difficulties. So typically these are recorded live on YouTube. So if you are listening to this on the podcast, feel free to head on over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And then you can catch these early because they drop about a week or two later on the podcast. So, and you can watch us record them live. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today. First of all, hi, Carrie.
Hi, Josh.
It's good seeing you today.
Yes, you too.
My favorite time of the week is our podcast time, by the way, just nice. So you know.
Even with the technical difficulties.
It is. It's just relaxed. Can you tell, Carl?
Yes, I can.
It's a bit more.
It's like a nice environment.
Nicer.
Because like when we're doing therapy, it's like just this hardcore pace. You just like one client after another. You got to get this, and you get a lunch break, but you got to hurry up and get that done.
Because you got to get your notes done.
Right, because you got to get your notes done, which we don't have internet today.
So I'm going home to do my notes. Yeah.
Right?
We have homework.
That's right, exactly.
So let me introduce Carl. Carl, thanks for being here today, first of all.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to kind of give a brief introduction and we can kind of get into dialogue. But the reason we're doing the topic, the power of the spoken word, is twofold. One is we're all therapists here and the words are meaningful to us. But secondly, you are actually, in addition to being a licensed counselor, you're a spoken word artist.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And so we will put some links in the description to a couple TEDx talks, which we're going to actually play a little clip from one of those today that Carl has been a part of, which are really good, where he addresses the spoken word and some other things it's packed with things. You know how TED Talks are. You also are part of a band. Correct?
Yes, it's a group. It's a hip-hop spoken word group, collective, if you will. And that formed maybe about 6-7 years ago with the idea of just spreading positive messaging and tackling some things that, some folks don't speak about or talk about.
If you want to plug them, what?
Yeah, well, we call it the Space Program. That's the name. And we have a lot of things going on right now, but we were started by a guy named Stevie Johnson. He goes by Dr. View. This started when he started his dissertation project, and being a producer and a DJ, he decided that he wanted to do more than just create the written format of a dissertation. He decided he wanted to create an album to kind of go along with it, based on his research. So he brought in some spoken word artists, some rappers, some singers and producers, engineers, a whole bunch of folks that related to his work, his research. And then we spent 4 months creating this album based on the content that he got from his research. And then he kind of presented his dissertation along with the album.
Wow.
And he ended up winning Dissertation of the Year.
I would imagine.
And when we were done, he decided that this was such a great idea and it was so powerful that he wanted us to continue. So we just kind of continued, and we've been around different states, and we perform, and we're a little different because we perform with a message. We come in with impactful statements, and it's all like directed towards something specific. And so we get brought into different universities and different organizations to kind of perform and to speak on the topics. So it's been a great experience.
It's really good. Wow, and cool. How can people find it?
Right now, we don't have a website set up, but they can find it through me because I post about it. So put the link for my Instagram. But we have a lot of things working on. We're actually going to do a new album coming up in this year, I believe. So I'm sure we'll have more information at that time, but they can follow it through me, through my Instagram.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll make sure to put your Instagram on the screen so people can follow that. Hey, can you hear the rhythm when he talks?
Yes.
Like,
Yes, it's very, yeah.
it's like, so when I was listening to your TED Talk, which was really good, by the way, and we'll play a clip for everybody here in just a minute. When you got done with the poem part, I couldn't tell if you were out of the poem part because you have rhythm when you speak, you know, like, and it's like,
it's musical.
Yeah, which is really cool. Which I'm sure a lot of that has to do with you do, you know, this for a living, and I'm assuming like with the poetry piece is very similar to hip hop where there is rhythm to it, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine like if you spend a lot of time doing that, what do you catch yourself kind of being in a rhythm when you talk sometimes, or like have you noticed that? Or
I do. My words have changed. My vocabulary has changed. It's enhanced, and the way I speak is in rhythm, and everything I write. It's even my notes. Sometimes, like I have to be careful. Sometimes I have to really reread my notes and like, am I writing it as a poem or am I writing? Am I writing a note?
He's talking about his therapy notes. For people who don't know, he's
therapy.
Progress
So
notes,
I'm so used to writing that way, and outside of like doing therapy, I write all the time. And so it's just such a practice that you get in rhythm. And I don't perform as much as I used to, but when I get back on stage, it's just like, you know, like riding a bike, I get right back into it.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Do your clients ever say that to you, that they feel a rhythm in the way that you're speaking?
Yeah, it's like I always call it a superpower. I kind of embraced it. I embraced it because it makes me unique and different. Because like obviously we're therapists, but we have other skills and hobbies and passions. And I think that's kind of how the TED Talk stuff kind of came about. I kind of brought in kind of my passion into my work. And so the idea behind that second TED Talk about trap therapy and how I use poetry in my therapy, it's just me embracing like my passion, like two passions, mental health and poetry. And kind of combining them as a useful tool in therapy. So.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that. Yeah. Really beautiful.
It is. Do you care if we just give people a taste of it real quickly?
Sure.
We're gonna play the just the poem part of his latest TEDx talk, and then we'll talk about it.
Years, and we turn the receipts of childhood trauma and destitution into prison bars and desolate futures. They once laid in their mother's womb, shielded, nestled, nurtured. A cocoon birthed a butterfly, forced to be grounded. A caterpillar in reverse, revisit the trauma, put them back in the womb where it was safe and their mother's love shielded. Flashbacks, they told my daddy to lay that crack pipe down. But flashbacks to belt whippings to his backside, and his grandfather's flashback to the whippings to his back and sides. Coping, unraveling into the white brick that leads to the sewer that they call poverty and leads to the school to prison pipeline. So I smoke this weed, hang out on corners past curfew, finding solace and joining gangs. And peace, forgetting about my past, the same way you forgot about my past. I carry guns and shoot because probation is premeditation, and so is this hunger, and so is this addiction, and so is this grief, and so is this conviction, and so is this trauma, and so is this trauma, and so is this trauma.
That's powerful, man.
It is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to share, if you don't mind, like kind of the idea where that came from.
Yeah. Please do.
So a lot of times doing spoken word, I speak for myself, obviously my experiences, but a lot of times I'm trying to give voice to others and other people's experiences. And working with a lot of juveniles in the juvenile system and on probation and hearing what they got to say and express themselves in therapy, I got influenced by giving them a voice of how they feel and what their experiences are. I think sometimes we judge them for the charges or the consequences that they're up against, and we kind of forget kind of the lens of where all that came from and why they chose those decisions and why they got to that place. So kind of unpacking that was me speaking from them for them through their lens. When I make comments about some of the actions they've done, but like we forget about their past and we think about their current status. And so that was kind of a poem to kind of focus on their experiences, not just the current experiences, but their past experiences that kind of led to some of the poor decision making that they've had. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, it's very powerful. But trying to listen to it as a person and as a therapist, you can hear all kinds of attachment theory and trauma theories in there, right? And speaking about it in the way that you do on that platform, I'm sure that people have heard those words, but the way you put it together, you can hear trying to tell the story, right? And thinking about how in trauma we talk a lot about it's about what happened to you, right? Kind of that statement.
Yeah.
I can hear that.
I was trying to tap into like people's empathy for these kids who are going through some of these challenges.
Sure.
I feel like working with some of the parents and the POs and the judges and things that I work with when dealing with kids in that circumstance, I feel like sometimes we're giving up on them. Sometimes we're just trying to get them through the process, or we're giving up on them. And a lot of this stuff is generational, so I tried to throw in generational trauma in there, talking about my father's grandfather's flashback, trying to talk about some of the things that we inherit from some of the experiences that our relatives go through.
Right.
To know that even though they got charges in their actions, where's that linked to?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? Why are they making these choices? And that's kind of like something to help them, help others who don't know what these kids are going through, understand what they're going through.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, probably my favorite line in there. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's really packed, and listening to it for the second time, there's just even more, But when you said that part about, and you kind of just mentioned it now too, is like that I, stand on the corner or whatever, and I have forgotten my past as you have. Of course, I'm butchering it right now, but you know what I mean. I forgot my past as you have forgotten my past, and it's just I love it when artists say the exact same line right adjacent to what they just said, but they say it with a little bit different inflection. It has different meaning to it, right? Because that's basically what you did. But I think there are a lot of people that won't hear that if you were just to say that to them. They won't hear it. Yeah. But something when you do something like poetry or music or whatever, and you put your words are intentional and you put rhythm behind them, and it kind of gets around our defenses. And now there will be some people that just will never hear it. But there are some people that will hear that when it's in that format, and it gets around all those defenses. And I think that's important for. I would imagine, like, for the kids and anybody who's gone through or has those life experiences, that's probably a very meaningful acknowledgement of what they're going through. But for people like me, who I don't know what it's like to be in poverty to that degree. I don't know what it's like to have a history of oppression for 400 years, and it's important for, I think, people like me to hear that and maybe, go, it's the Sue Johnson thing where it's like,
when the dog
the dog cocks
that's
his
a good moment in therapy.
If anybody watch, that's an inside therapy joke.
Or
the dog kind of cocks their head at the kid playing the recorder or something. But we can all imagine the dog cocking their head a little bit, and
thinking about it differently.
And when you said that, I'm like, ooh, that's good. And it's good for people who don't understand the people you're speaking about. It's good for them to hear that, in my opinion, in that way. At least there will be some who don't.
Right. But I think that's the beauty of art too, right?
Yeah.
That it connects. That's why it's important.
I'm so thankful you said that, because the way I write my poems, I write them in layers, right? Like, I feel like on the surface, if you just read through it, you gain something from it. Like, you can understand where it's coming from just on the surface. But I feel like if you really dissect what I'm trying to say, there's more things that are layered in there for other people to grasp and to understand. And it may not connect to everyone, but some will. And if some wanted to try to connect to it, they could go deeper into it and try to connect with it as well. And that's very important to me.
Okay.
Another thing that you said that is important to me is I'm trying to connect, obviously, with the through the lens of the people I'm trying to write this specific poem for. I'm also trying to, for those who don't know about that life or that story or through that lens, I want you to connect to it too.
Right.
I want you to try. I want people to connect to it and say, someone's seeing me. I'm being heard. I'm being seen. But I want others to say, you know what, this is helping me see them.
Yes.
Or helping me hear them.
Right.
So I kind of write it from both. So if you're going through it, I wanted to connect to you. But if you're not, or you haven't experienced, I want the poem to still have value because I want you to see it through their lens when you read through it and say, you know what, I haven't gone through this, but maybe I need to understand more about what they do go through and what their experiences are. So I feel like it can be helpful on both sides. And that's when I'm writing, I take that into consideration.
Yeah.
Your audience.
Well, why do you think it is that our brains like alliteration, for example, or rhythm, and it like evokes an emotion, that you might not get if you just were to even just reading the words on paper and not hearing the intent behind it. Like,
Sure.
I mean, Carl, you have just like I think any artist when they're painting something or whatever, they know where this is. Coming from, right? But of course, we all get to interpret it. But like, nobody's going to hear that poem as good as it was by you. If they were to just read it or something. Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, why do you think? I wonder why our brains like really like that. Like,
I don't know for sure, but my first thought when you said that was I think it mimics the heartbeat, right? That's one of the first things that happens, right? Is that connection and that rhythm, that which is life, right? And so maybe there's something really, I don't know. I have no scientific study to back this up that I can recall, but it just feels like that rhythm of the heartbeat is something we're familiar with right away. And maybe there's something that soothes the nervous system when things are alliterated and repeated, and that there's some kind of pattern you can pick up on.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. It feels like order and control.
Perhaps.
And without knowing the science behind it, I think in my sessions, one thing I really try doing as a therapist is I'm trying to invoke thought or feelings or emotions. And it's the same way with my poetry. I always tell people when they ask me, like, what's your style of poetry or what do you do? I said, it's about being disruptive. And that always throws them off. Like, what do you mean disruptive? Because disruptive is looked at as a negative term.
Sure.
Right? Oh, you're going to... But disruptive is more about change.
Yes.
Right?
Sure.
So
Yes.
when I write, right, like I try to write to make you feel something or to make you think something.
Right.
So even if you don't think something that, like, even if you disagree with what you're feeling or what you're thinking, I still moved you. I still disrupted you, which is going to make you be in more thought.
Absolutely.
And the goal is to disrupt you. And I used to be an English teacher. And I used to teach poetry, and one thing I used to tell my students, I'm like, I want you to disrupt how I feel when I read this. To disrupt how I think.
Assignment.
I said, if you write this and I don't think anything, I don't feel anything, then why did we write it, right? So I want to make you feel and want to make you think.
Yeah.
So I think emotions and feelings is what I try to drive when I'm writing. It's like, can I get you to think? Can I get you to feel?
Yeah.
And then it's more impactful when you can do that.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's just like an orderliness to it, like. I think music's like that too. And I think there was a study, and I'm going to give my disclaimer here that I want the right to be wrong on what I'm about to say. But I want to say I remember reading a study that said something to the effect of that basically happy people listen to sad songs, and the idea is that, the song itself doesn't produce an emotion, it taps into it already. So it's not a sad song, it's sad to you because it tapped into some aspect of your own story, right? And I think, like, even with music and stuff, we feel safe with music, right? But if if I walked up to somebody just randomly and quoted some line from some lyric from a song or something, thinking that's going to have the same impact, it likely would be defensive and probably a little weirded out, wondering like,
Well, first of all, weird.
why are you quoting Kanye to me, man? Like,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But and so I mean, we're all just kind of speculating here. I mean, we're probably all wrong on why it does what it does.
Perhaps.
But I think what universally is true is that most people like words and they like rhythm to it. That's why we have music.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe spoken word is nothing but storytelling with a visual aesthetic that kind of desires connection. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're up there and speaking. We're trying to connect you to our stories or connect to your story, but giving you a visual and doing it with style and doing it with different aspects, using our voice as an instrument to kind of give you that connection.
A lot of overlap to therapy as well, right?
Absolutely.
Connection, creating images and stories. Yeah.
It's very seamless to connect poetry and therapy.
I can see
because
that.
people are coming in there to tell you their stories.
Yes.
So you're basically giving them a rhythm.
Yeah.
You're giving them like a story that has a rhythm to it, which is expressive and it's open and it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so people connect with that. And then they get to write it in their own words and take time to write it.
Yeah.
And so when I've done it with clients, it's, I have a format how I do it, but when I do it with clients, they feel relieved. There's a relief of like, I'm getting to tell my story in my words and I'm getting to say it out loud in therapy to someone which is vulnerable. So.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think when we just started today and the power of the spoken word, I thought how many times I've had people say, what, we just come in here and talk and this changes things, right? Or you tell people what you do, you're a therapist, so what do you just talk and people just listen and that changes them? And the answer is yes, of course. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. But the interesting thing too is that words is often why people are in here to begin with too. I mean, think about some of the most heartbreaking things I hear in a therapy room aren't things that happen to people as much as things that are said to people, especially kids. When they're telling their stories about something that was said to them that just stayed with them their whole life, and impacted them that way. And it's interesting that it's in a way. I mean, there's also treatments like EMDR where there's not a lot of speaking happening, right?
Right.
And it's just interesting that in talk therapy we're using the mechanism that was kind of the culprit to their pain. We're using that same tool for healing, and so
and adding layers of spoken word is you're helping them learn the language or giving them the language. A lot of times they don't know how to say it or how to express it, so you're trying to help them find that language. And it helps them kind of clear out and unburden themselves using an IFS term, like unburden themselves from their experiences. That, and again, another IFS term, the exiles that were created. You help them go in the past and retell that story.
Yes.
But tell it from self, from the present day, which helps them unburden those exiles and helps them free themselves. So.
Yeah. And I can see, especially in your experience and history of working with young people that don't have the words, right? They haven't been exposed, they haven't learned, and it's different to learn it on a piece of paper versus say, oh, this is what I'm going through, right? And so it's very powerful to offer this fresh tool, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you know how you want them to be vulnerable and speak it out loud and tell you. Sometimes it's safer for them to write it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then using spoken word, then they present it verbally. So you're getting to that vulnerability where they're saying it out loud.
Yes.
Which is what we're trying to get to, where we can build off that. So I use poetry as an entryway a lot of times to get them to feel safe and to be vulnerable.
Sure.
And then we take that and we go through whatever modality or model I'm using. But the poetry was the connection to help you get to that space.
Yeah. It's that line, name it to tame it. And that's kind of the vehicle that you do that.
A lot of times when the teens they're younger, or if in this case, when they're court ordered, they don't want to be a part of it. They don't want to be involved.
Sure.
But you give them a platform or a path to say, hey, let's just focus on how you feel, and you can write it down and write it how you want to write it. Let's use poetry. And then they start being verbal, and they realize how good that feels to say it out loud. And now you formed a connection, but you also have provided a safe space at the same time. And now these kids are willing. Now they're like, when's the next one? What should I write about next? And they're like, whatever you want to write about, you tell me. And then that's when the therapy come in. You take, there's content and there's context in what they're telling you. And so I would read their poetry. And then I'm like, okay, now I know how to follow this treatment plan. Because you've given me a lot of information in there. And so we kind of go off of that. And sometimes they don't even realize we're doing therapy at that point.
That's
now
my
they're
favorite,
enjoying
right?
therapy.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, what's the next thing we're going to write about?
Right.
I'm like, whatever you want, and then we'll go from there. So.
Right. When you were listening to the poem, was your imagination forming images and stuff as it was going through it?
Sure. Yeah. And images, real people, groups of people, all the ways that I think we try to the brain tries to categorize things into known and unknown. And that's what I was probably doing.
One of the ones that stood out to me too, because I think you're right. Like it's storytelling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and storytelling is as we know from Yuval Harari and the what's the name of that book?
Sapiens.
Right.
Yeah.
The book called Sapiens. It's a big theoretically, I think anthropologists believe that storytelling is largely why Homo sapiens rose to the species of power, basically. And when you in the poem, when you were talking about the crack and like and then it's like. Then it's the crack or the whip or the belt, and like you're kind of and you start building on these terms. It's like it means one thing when you first said it, then you used it the same term in a different context, building on history. And in my mind, it's just it's going back in time. It starts with my brain starts with a kid in poverty on a street corner, and then it's like now they're in a home, and it's years ago, and they're before civil rights movement and stuff, and they're getting hurt and injured and whipped, and then it's slavery or whatever. It's it's really neat how, and I didn't even think about it until we were talking about storytelling, that while that poem's going on, my brain, my imagination is doing a lot of work in that.
So there's so many layers just to that part, and I'll share just a little bit of it. So you're right on the money. Like, I'm trying to resurface the history. So I'm going back to the slavery, to the times of, because I'm trying to connect to generational, right? So I'm going into the whole slavery thing. Also, I'm going into the whole impoverished and how it's hard to make good decisions when you don't have the resources and you're trying to survive. But also, there's a layer that you would have to go deeper to understand, where my dad was actually an addict and he was on crack. So that line is personal. That line is actually a layer from my life and my story, which even when I'm speaking to the lens of others, I try to include myself and my personal story, and I kind of lace it in my poems. So even in that aspect, there's a layer of myself in that line too. So there's lines in there that is for others, it's for me, because also when I'm writing, I'm trying to heal too. Right. So I'm trying to heal my exiles as well. And so as I'm writing, I'm thinking of all those aspects. And that's what I mean about the layers.
Right.
Yeah. Just thinking about all of the effort that goes into that, and the amount of vulnerability on your part, right? In an attempt to connect to your audience, right? To invite their vulnerability.
If I'm going to ask others to be vulnerable, I have to model that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I model that, and I'm transparent. So make sure that there's also a stronger connection.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to just speak through your lens without actually doing the same
Doing
thing.
it too.
Yeah.
Sure, that whole rule, right? We don't ask people to do what we're not willing to do ourselves. Yeah.
So I share my transparency, and I model that, my vulnerability.
Yeah.
Well, man, I could listen to you talk all day.
I know.
Carrie does get to listen to you talk all day.
I know. Sometimes I do hear you next door. And I'll be like, oh yeah, that's good advice.
And if anybody listening to this can't tell, Carl's got a very booming voice. So,
my poetry voice.
Yeah, that's right.
It'd be funny if one of your clients was like, "Is the radio on in there?"
I know.
Some
good radio
what's that
voice.
Called? Is it called slam poetry?
Slam poetry.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Right. But as we probably better wrap up. But I would like everybody to make sure you go check out Carl's Instagram, and also you can find his profile page because he's on our website, which is FamilySolutionsOK.com. He is one of our therapists here, and we're happy to have him. You definitely add a unique element to it. You're also very well trained in a lot of other things.
Yes.
Which I would love to dive into. We'll have to do this another time into
Yes.
IFS because he was mentioning IFS.
Yeah.
So people who don't know what that
I'd
is,
love
it's
to talk
another
about that
form
with him.
of treatment. And interestingly enough, I would say like IFS, if it might be more of a visual poetry in a sense, and less spoken word and more imagination,
Yeah.
and also very powerful form of treatment.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, to kind of wrap up, what would be like when it comes to the power of the spoken word, and thinking about an audience of people that aren't therapists, they're just kind of listening to this. What would be kind of a final message you would have? Yeah.
Just there's healing in your story. I think all of our stories are important. So whether you're journaling or whether you're writing, just writing, or if you're doing it in style with poetry. And my thing is, I'm always about free poetry, like free writing. So I think a lot of times people get caught up in the specific styles of poetry. But I think your story is your poetry, and sharing your story and expressing yourself and being vulnerable does induce healing. Folks to share their story, whether you're literally sharing it with others or if you're just sharing it by writing it down and writing in a journal and with no intent for others to see it. But I think just sharing your story, and poetry is storytelling, and it's powerful and it induces healing. So we all need healing, and we all need to move forward in life. So I just use it as a tool,
Yeah, that's great.
I like that.
as a healing tool.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Carl.
Thank you guys for having me.
We should do it
I
again.
appreciate it.
We should.
Sure, I'm humbled
Okay.
that you invited me. I'll come back anytime.
Okay,
All right,
good.
thanks.
Got more to do.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.